Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever and wherever you're watching or listening. This is the Stochastic NHL DFS Strategy Show, and I am not Josh Harris. I am Michael Clifford, aka Slim Cliffy, riding a solo show here today. Josh has some personal matters to attend to. Hopefully he's back soon. Don't really have much of an update. So just for the time being, I'm going to be doing these shows solo. Coming off an interesting weekend, coming off an interesting Sunday yesterday. We had a late night hammer, Anaheim and Chicago. Anaheim, true to the title, put the hammer down on Chicago 7-1, put up over 50 shots on goal. Now, I was watching the Montreal game, so I didn't see much of that game. Only caught the third period. I mean, it was out of hand by that point. But listen, the Ducks, quack, kind of doing their thing this year. They're taking the step forward that we thought they could. And as Frostback says, yes, belt to ass last night. I don't read too much into one game, but I do think Chicago still has some growing pains to go through. Anaheim just has a fairly deep lineup up front, and their defenseman, Jacob Trouba's having a really good year, bouncing back from his time, especially the end of his time with the Rangers. Owen Zellweger's been a great partner with him. Obviously, Jackson LaCombe, stalwart. So Anaheim, obviously, they didn't, they had some big games. I think Leo Carlson had a pair of goals. Seneke had a couple of points. Nobody had, one of those like 2 goals, 3 assist games, but Anaheim certainly put the beat down on Montreal. They lost that game. I thought it was a game they probably should have won. They controlled the play basically for the first 40 minutes. They had one bad minute at the start of the second period. St. Louis scored twice and they lost. Those are the thin margins in the NHL. But enough about the slate yesterday. Brandon says Minty is underrated. Pavel Mintyukov, interesting guy. He's a guy that I honestly want to write in research, like a 5,000 word piece on him, because where he was as a rookie and where he is now, it's like two completely different players, but all the skills are still there. Very interesting player. But Anaheim's not on this slate. Wish they were. We do love Anaheim slates here at Stochastic, but nice little 5-game slate ahead of us. One of those late night slates. I think it's Tampa and Toronto are playing the Amazon Prime game at 7:30 Eastern, and then no other game starts until 9 o'clock Eastern. So 2 at 9 and 2 at 10 Eastern. So if you're somebody that goes to bed early, might not be the greatest slate for you. But there is Monday Night Football, so you got something to stay up and watch. If you don't want to watch hockey, you just want to change your lineups. But we may have to change some lineups. The good news is we'll get to Tampa and Toronto here in a second. Tampa Bay is expecting some lineup changes in a good sense, getting some players back from injury, but we don't know what the lineup is going to be. So, what the hell? We may as well just jump right back into it. Tampa Bay 3.2 total. They're going into Toronto. The Toronto Maple Leafs also have a 3.2 total. The big news, both Nikita Kucherov and Braden Point back for Tampa Bay. Kucherov obviously taking a spot back on the top power play unit, though, as we've mentioned on a couple of shows, he's basically playing both halves of the power play at this point. So almost regardless of what his line is going to be, he's probably going to be perfectly correlated with them. But again, we're going to have to see when warmups roll around at 7 o'clock Eastern. The nice thing is that it is the first game. So if you do have to make some swaps, you're going to have, maybe 20 minutes or so to make those swaps. So don't exactly know what the lineup is going to be for Tampa. The last game Braden Point played, the top line was Cirelli, Kucherov, and Hagel. The second line was Braden Point, Jake Gensel, Nick Paul, and then down from there. A top line of Cirelli, Kucherov, and Hagel would be 21,200. The second line of Paul, Point, and Gensel would be 17,700. It'll be interesting to see how Braden Point looks coming back. I'm going to start on the Tampa side here because obviously Braden Point, for all the offense that he's shown in the past, 3 straight 40-goal seasons. He had a 50-goal season in there, 3 straight seasons with at least a point per game. He's had 3 90-point seasons in his career. He's still on the right side of 30 years old. He had a terrible start to his season, just 3 goals and 11 points in 21 games. And Then he misses a couple weeks with injury, and you don't wonder if he was trying to play through some sort of injury early on. It's just speculation. But it's kind of like Thomas Harley with Dallas, right? Like Thomas Harley for 2.5 seasons was one of like the 5 best offensive defensemen in the NHL, at least on a per minute basis. And then he starts this season and he's terrible. And then he's missed 3 weeks with injury now. So you don't wonder if Braden Point kind of wasn't going under the same thing. Maybe he comes back and he's the Braden Point of old, which would be nice because it's not like you're getting a steep discount on him. Braden Point is 6,300, and again, he has 3 goals in 21 games. It's a steep overprice. It's one of those things where Point is severely overpriced for what he's done so far this season. If you look at what he's done over the last 3 years, 4 years, he's probably underpriced. So it's one of those things we'll definitely have to see what the lineup looks like. If it is Cirelli, Kucherov, and Hagel, remember that line was tremendous together. 84 shot attempts, 5.9 expected goals per 60 at 5-on-5. And, where Kucherov is playing the 2 halves of the power play, whether, Cirelli and Hagel are with him on the first or the second, they are going to be perfectly correlated somehow. At 21,200, if that is the line, they would be by far the most expensive line on the board by almost $3,000. So they're kind of in a spot of their own. I don't hate playing them, one, because they're going up against Toronto, and obviously Toronto has really had their defensive issues so far this season, and they're missing Joseph Woll, who has been their best goalie. The rest of the goalies really haven't been completely up to snuff. Here's the thing, is that Tampa Bay's power play really hasn't been that good this year. And it's with or without Braden Point. Like, this is a team where year after year, they had basically like one of the 5 or 6 best power plays in the league, and they're league average, worse than league average this year. Not what you want to see, but I want to show something. It's research that I've done about save percentages and expected goals against on the penalty kill. I'm writing about this tomorrow over on my newsletter. If you head on over to my Twitter account or Blue Sky account, at Slim Cliffy, my newsletter 10 Stats is posted there. You can subscribe. It is free. You do not have to pay, and it goes out every Tuesday morning. I was looking at early season expected goals against rates at 4-on-5. So only 4-on-5, not 3-on-5 penalty kills or 3-on-4 penalty kills or anything like that. Just 4-on-5. If you look at last season through the first 900 some games, and that's about where we are. We're at 920 total individual games for teams this year. If you look at the first 900 some games from last year, and then look at those teams' save percentages over the rest of the season, it's a pretty clear downward trend. This is last year. Your x-axis here is the expected goals against early in the season. Your y-axis is team save percentage at 4-on-5 the rest of the year. You can see a pretty clear downward trend where teams that were bad on the penalty kill, giving up a lot of expected goals, had generally had poor save percentages the rest of the way. The only real exception was Winnipeg, and Connor Hellebuck being an exception, not a big surprise. I say all that because Toronto, one of the worst expected goals against rates on the penalty kill so far this season. In fact, if you look at their 30 games so far, the second worst expected goals against rate on the penalty kill this season at 11.8. Despite that, their save percentage is the 4th best of any team on the penalty kill this season. It's one of those things where if it holds, I suspect Toronto, if Toronto's penalty kill doesn't improve, like their metrics, their on-ice metrics, not the goaltending, the on-ice metrics from the players, if that doesn't improve, this penalty kill could go very, very south, very, very fast. And that's why I think it's not necessarily a great power play matchup for Tampa Bay, given what Toronto has done so far. But if Toronto doesn't clean up the front of their net and clean up some of the quality shots they're giving up on the penalty kill, things are going to get a lot worse over the next 50-some games. So that's why, I don't want to call it a get-right spot for Tampa Bay because it's Point's first game back. It's Kucherov's first game back. You don't know what kind of minutes they're going to play. Does Point only play 16, 17 minutes? Yeah, this is a guy who had lost about 30 seconds per game before the injury compared to last year. But at 21,200 with all the filler stacks on the board, like there are a handful of filler stacks we'll get to. I think Tampa 1 is firmly in play if it is Cirelli, Kucherov, Hagel. If it's like Cirelli, Kucherov, Gensel or something like that, I think that's fine as well. I don't know if I'm ready to take the plunge on Braden Point yet. Braden Point, as I mentioned, not really having a good season. He's very overpriced for what he's done so far this year. So I'm not so much in on a Tampa 2 stack, if it's like Point, Gensel, and Paul, or Point, Gensel, and Bjorkstrand or something like that. Probably not for me. So to me, this is a Tampa 1 or bust game. This is, I hope the top line absolutely goes off. I'm assuming it's Cirelli, Kucherov, and Hagel, but again, we're going to have to look to see what that looks like in warmups. On the Toronto side, they're running back the same lineup: Matthews, Nyes, Domi, Tavares, Nylander, Cowan, and then you have Roy and McMahon and Joshua on the third line. Now, this won't surprise anybody, but the defensive numbers for the Toronto top line with Max Domi, they're pretty bad. It's only about a 70-minute sample, but 68 shot attempts, 3.7 expected goals against per 60. That's the matchup Tampa 1 is probably going to get. That's why I don't mind Tampa 1 here tonight. Normally, I don't play super expensive lines, but this is a short slate. And if they smash, you either have them or you don't. That's basically true of any line that smashes on a short slate. But it is a great 5-on-5 matchup for Tampa. The Tampa top line, conversely, as good as they've been offensively, giving up goals defensively, 3.5 expected goals against per 60. Not what you want to see. They're not giving a lot of shot attempts up though, so I don't wonder if there was like 1 or 2 flurries where teams racked up a lot of expected goals in a small time frame, and it'll just kind of even itself out. But the one thing that concerns me is like Austin Matthews really not shooting a lot. 34 shots in his last 10 games. Considering this is a guy like over 4 shots, typically, sometimes flirting with like 5 shots per game, being under 3.5 over his last 10 is fairly concerning for me. They're only at 56 shot attempts, 2.8 expected goals per 60. And with the new power play setup, you do get Matthews and Nyes on the top power play, but they're not perfectly correlated. And that Toronto top line at 17,800, you're not really getting much of a discount on them as far as ownership goes. It's 14.5% ownership on that top line, which I understand because it's an Austin Matthews line priced under 18K. You get 2 guys on the power play. And it's Jonas Johansson and net, not Vasilevsky for Tampa Bay. So, like, I do understand playing Toronto 1 here. I almost have some interest in dipping down to Toronto 2. Nylander, Tavares, and Cowan, 18,300. It's basically because you're getting them at a half the ownership. Now, for the issues that I mentioned about Matthews and his shot volume, William Nylander is kind of going through the same thing. 20 shots in his last 10 games. Nylander hasn't really been the shot volume guy he has been for years now. I mean, last year he was at 3.1 shots per game. The 2 seasons before that, 3.9 and 3.6. He's at 2.2 this year. That's why I kind of have a tough time going to Nylander here at 8K. Like, there's just not enough shot volume there. Like, at 8K, the guy could honestly get like a goal and an assist with a few shots, and you go like 2x, a little over 2x. It's just not that much. And if he's not going to really be a threat for a DK shot bonus, like he has 3 of them this year, only 3. I don't know, kind of out on Toronto 2. Toronto 3 is a little interesting, 8,500. If you're doing some sort of Minnesota power play stack, I guess that's fine. By default, I guess it's Toronto 1, Matthews, Nyes, and Domi, but I'm not in love with the ownership at 14.5 to 15%. The only benefit is that they're shooting against Jonas Johansson, but you could probably say that about Toronto too, shooting against Dennis Hill to be. Not that he's been terrible this year, but it's just that none of the goalies have been as good as Joseph Woll. All right, let's get to our next game here. Brandon asks, in NHL, you want at least 3x, right? Generally speaking, you don't need obviously 3x would be nice. My barometer for like a successful fantasy night is like 2.4x. So, if a guy is, 8K, probably need, around 20 DK points, 19 DK points, like something like that. 3 is great. My barometer, because my barometer for a successful game is about 2.4, because that's about one standard deviation about the league average. So like the top 15 or 16% of results is about 2.4x or higher. So that's kind of my barometer. Obviously, the higher the better. The next game, we have the Buffalo Sabres going into Calgary, both teams with a 3.0 goal total. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, not officially confirmed, but about as confirmed as it can get without being officially confirmed. Starting for Buffalo, Dustin Wolf going for Calgary. I just showed that chart about save percentages on the penalty kill and expected goals against. The Buffalo Sabres. So far this season, Buffalo has the 8th highest rate of expected goals against per 60 on the penalty kill. They also have a 931 save percentage on the penalty kill. It is by far the highest in the league. It's leading to the second lowest goals against rate. It's one of those things where if those expected goals against stay where they are for the rest of the season or about that rate, that the save percentage is going to crash, like absolutely crash. And it's something that's kind of already started, 918 over the last 5 weeks. So it's starting to go down slowly. The unfortunate thing is, it's not like Calgary has a good power play. Calgary has been running things with 6.6 goals per 60 minutes with Rasmus Andersson running the top unit. Honestly, that's probably the best that they've done. It's well below average. I think the league average for a top power play unit is about 8.7 goals per 60. So about 25% worse than the league average. Not ideal. There's also a ton of ownership coming in on Calgary, and I think rightly so. Obviously they're all cheap. Every line on the Flames is around 10 to 13K, or at least the top 3 lines are. Buffalo has been probably the worst team on the road so far this season. Now, funny enough, Buffalo's only played 12. I think it's 12 road games, played 16 at home. But on the road this season, Buffalo only has 2 wins, and they're giving up 4.2 goals against per 60 minutes. It's the most in the league by half a goal. 3.55 expected goals against per 60 minutes in the bottom 7 of the league, in there with teams like the Ducks and the Islanders. Buffalo just horrific on the road. Now, they do have a mostly full lineup. They're still missing, Yuri Kulik and Michael Kesselring. But it's not as if the Buffalo Sabres, the lines that they have really been tremendous defensively. Buffalo is going with some new line combinations. Top line of Alex Tuch with Tage Thompson and Jordan Greenway. Second line of Josh Norris with Josh Doan and Zach Benson. Third line of McLeod, Quinn, and Zucker, which we have seen a fair bit this year. Now, Greenway on the top line for Buffalo. He hasn't spent a lot of time there this year. The Buffalo top line with Greenway, though, going back a couple years since he got to Buffalo, 1.9 expected goals against, 53 shot attempts against per 60. Generally been good defensively, but again, that's basically spread out over 2 calendar years, and it's about 120 minutes. So not going to read a whole lot into it. Just want to mention that they have been solid defensively. The thing is, that only affects Backlund, Coleman, and Zari, because that's a line that's going to go out against Thompson. That leaves the Kadri line and the Frost line against some what I think are going to be good secondary matchups. Now, we don't have a sample on the new Buffalo 2 line. Obviously, Josh Norris has only played 5 or 6 games or whatever for Buffalo since coming over in the trade. Zach Benson's missed time with injury this year, so they don't really have a sample together. But the third line, McLeod, Quinn, and Zucker, 3.1 expected goals against per 60 in their 85 minutes together. That's the line that the Kadri line is probably going to go out against. And the Kadri line is at 76 shot attempts, 3.5 expected goals per 60 minutes. They're not getting a ton of ice time of late, but nobody really is on Calgary. Like there's a whole bunch of guys between like 14 and 18 minutes. Priced at 13,000, coming in, at 1.5x ownership compared to their top two stack. Like I don't hate Calgary 2 here. I think they're going to get a pretty good 5-on-5 matchup. I think the penalty kill matchup isn't as bad as it seems. You do get Kadri on the top power play unit. But this is still a low scoring team that is not good on the power play, with only one guy on the top power play unit anyway. I would probably dip down to Coronado, Huberdeau, and Frost. Whatever line they go up against, it's not going to be the Thompson line. They're going to see some middle six matchups. That Calgary line, 170 minutes together, 72 shot attempts, 3.4 expected goals, 3.6 actual goals per 60. So this has been a Calgary line that's not only creating, but also scoring, and they're perfectly correlated on the power play, coming in with under 10% ownership at 12,900. I like Calgary 1 here. This is the line that I would probably take. If you want to do a Backlund, Coleman, Zari because you are playing expensive Tampa Bay, expensive Minnesota, something like that, I do think they're perfectly fine. But that Calgary line has been very, very good at 5-on-5. They're perfectly correlated on the power play in case the power play scores here. And coming in with under 10% ownership, I think that's the Calgary line I would go to. On the Buffalo side, I'm out on the Thompson line. Only one guy on the power play. Calgary's penalty kill has been improving, but a lot of that is related to their goaltending. 929 save percentage on the PK over the last 5 weeks. It's not going to sustain itself, but the Buffalo power play has actually been pretty good this year. When they have everybody healthy, when Doan is in the lineup, when Zucker is in the lineup, when all those guys are healthy, the Buffalo top power play unit, 13.8 expected goals, 12.5 actual goals per 60. Those are just like high-end numbers. Those are like not quite Edmonton, but just a step below. Very, very, very good numbers. Calgary, I'm not buying that their penalty kill is all of a sudden a lot better just because of it's save percentage driven. So I want to get exposure to the power play. That means Norris, Doan, and Benson. They're coming in at they're coming in at 13,100, 2% top two stack, 1.2% ownership. They're in that no man's land where they're not quite a filler like the third line, which is also fine, and they're not quite a mid-price stack of the top line. It's keeping some ownership off of them. You do get two guys on the top power play unit. Josh Doan has just been, fantastic this year over his last 10 games, 1.4 expected goals per 60, 25 shots. Doan has played very well off the cycle this year for Buffalo. I kind of do like Norris, Doan, and Benson. I think my favorite line in this game is still the Coronado, Frost, Huberdeau line from the Calgary side, but I think Buffalo 2 firmly in play here tonight. Those are the lines that I like particularly. I also worry about Buffalo just kind of nuking their lines if they get down 2-0. This is not a team that is, as I mentioned, this is not a team that has played well on the road this year, staring down back-to-back losses to start this road trip. I do wonder if they get down 2-0 late in the first period, early in the second or something, if they don't, blow it all up. But can't really predict that. So for me, it's Calgary 2 and Buffalo 2 out of this one. Moving on, Los Angeles Kings, 2.7 total. Going into Utah. Utah has a 2.7 total. What up, Kyle? Logan Cooley out. Looks like he's going to be out for a little while. They said he's out indefinitely. How long that's going to be, I guess we'll see. That's why it's called indefinite. Utah running back, the lineup that they have been going without Cooley, that is Keller, Schmaltz, and Peterka, with a second line of Cheeks and Hayden and Genther, third line of McBain, Krause, Carcone. Assuming we get the same Los Angeles lines, Los Angeles had been running Alex Laferriere with Kempe and Kopitar. The second line had been the same, has been the same for a while. Byfield, Fiala, Armia. I'm going to start on the Utah side. This is a tough matchup for Utah. Calgary. Los Angeles, legitimately one of the top defensive teams in the league. If you look just over the last 5 weeks, their expected goals against per 60, fourth lowest in the league. Shots against per 60, fourth lowest in the league. Goals against per 60, eighth lowest in the league. And about, give or take, about 25% lower than the league average. So they're not really giving up a whole lot defensively. And since a tough start to the season on the penalty kill, they've stopped taking penalties. The Kings had 2.5 times shorthanded per game over the last 5 weeks. It's one of the 10 lowest rates in the league. Not that Utah draws very many power plays. That's the other issue. Utah over the last 5 weeks, 2.3 power play opportunities per game. It's the third lowest rate in the league. And in that span, Utah is scoring 0.22 power play goals per game. That is by far the lowest rate in the league. Like, by far. The next closest team to Utah for power play goals per game over the last 5 weeks is about 80% higher, and it's Calgary. So Utah's power play has been pretty bad. Los Angeles penalty kill has been pretty good. They don't take penalties. So I get wanting to play Utah 1. With the Cooley injury, they're going to be perfectly correlated. 16,400 for Utah 1, 10.4% top 2 stacks, 6.5% ownership. That's kind of interesting to me because, listen, this is a bad matchup for Utah. We went over why on the penalty kill, went over why just generally speaking with Los Angeles's excellent team defense. The thing is like the Kings can still give up goals, right? A couple weeks ago, they gave up 3 to San Jose. A week after that, they gave up 4 to Anaheim. If you can get like 2 correlated goals from a line that's 16,400, that's perfectly fine, right? Like at that point, you're at that 2.4x threshold, and they can, that top line can get 2 goals in their time together. 3.2 expected goals, 70 shot attempts per 60 minutes. Again, perfectly correlated. Peterka has 25 shots in his last 10 games. I honestly don't mind Utah 1 here just because they're perfectly correlated at a very good price at home and no one's playing them. Like I said, 6.5% ownership. I don't mind playing them. I can say I haven't made my lineup yet. I can say with relative confidence, I'm not going to play them in my single entry. If I was 20 maxing tonight, I would absolutely have at least one of Utah's top line here. Like I said, this isn't a line that's like 19,900 where you need like 2 correlated goals, maybe a shot bonus and a block bonus, or like 3 correlated goals would be nice, like something like that. You don't need that. If they get 2 goals, you're probably fine. And they can absolutely get 2 goals against Los Angeles here tonight. So if I'm 20 maxing, 150 maxing, certainly I would be getting some Utah 1. I do think, though, it's such a tough matchup that in single entry, I'm probably not going in that direction. The second line, Genther's showed well when he hasn't had Clayton Keller or Logan Cooley. They're not getting very much ice time. I'm going to be honest, at that point, I would probably just go down to the third line. Krause, Carconi, McBain. Those guys, at the low end, Carconi and McBain playing 13, 14 minutes. At the high end, Krause about 16.5 over the last 5 games. The Utah second line with Genther, Hayden, and Cheeks, they're at about 13 to 16 minutes a game as well. The only difference, obviously, is that Genther gets top power play time. But again, the power play has been terrible. They may not get a lot of opportunities. And that third line is $3K cheaper, $3,200 cheaper, in fact. So if I'm playing super expensive Minnesota or whatever, I think it's Utah 3 that I gravitate towards. Utah 1 is my favorite line on their side, even factoring in price. But again, I think that's something I would reserve for 20 max or above. On the Kings side, LaFerriere hasn't played a ton on the top line. Going back to last season, 75 minutes together with Kopitar and Kempe, 3 expected goals per 60. Kempe and Kopitar still on the top power play unit, not like it matters. Los Angeles' power play, not a whole lot better than Utah's. It's actually been better, but compared to the league average, it's not been very good. So, Utah doesn't take a ton of penalties either. I was looking over the last 2 years, the Kings' top power play with Drew Doughty, 98 shot attempts, 7.9 goals per 60. Those are below average numbers. Not awful, like not Philadelphia Flyers last year awful. But again, below league average. So I'm not super concerned about power play correlation here. If you do want to play that left area line, I think they're fine. 14,900. 4.7% top two stack, 2.5% ownership. That's fine. I would rather play them than Fiala, Byfield, and Armia. I'll say that. And the reason for that is that Byfield and Armia just honestly haven't been that good this year. And with Armia there, 59 shot attempts, 2.9 expected goals per 60. Like those are above average, but not great numbers. Depending how they decide to line up on the power play, you might only get one, maybe two guys on the top power play unit. They're basically all Mikey Hendersons. Like not quite that bad, but you know what I mean? I'd rather just pay the extra $1,000 to go to Kempe, Kopitar, Lafayette. At least, they've been somewhat productive together over the last couple of years. Again, you get 2 out of the 3 on the top power play. You get them at less ownership at the same top two stack. I think that's worth $1,000 for me. So Kings 1 is my favorite thing on the Kings side. It's probably my favorite line in this game. I prefer the Kings side to the Utah side. So it's Kings 1, Utah 3. Yeah, this is a tough game. Both with 2.7 implied totals. So leaning under on the 5.5. Probably not going to go too heavy into this one. Moving along to the next one, we have the Minnesota Wild with a 2.8 total going into Seattle. Seattle with a 2.6. As the chat mentioned, Philip Grubauer confirmed for Seattle. Listen, I still think Decord is the better goalie, but Decord had started 5 straight and the team lost all 5 games. Now, was it his fault? They only scored 9 goals in those 5 games? Probably not. But he had also given up, I think, 16 goals in his last 3 games, so probably due for a rest anyway. So, and assuming Minnesota keeps to their rotation, it'll be Philip Gustafsson for the Wild. Seattle did change up their lines a bit in the last game. I'm going to be honest, how much does it really matter? But assuming they go back to Beniers, McCann, Everly, that line, 66 shot attempts, 3.7 expected goals per 60, all playing somewhere between 17 and 20 minutes a night. All on the top power play unit. Not like we ever stacked Seattle for the top power play exposure, but, all correlated on the power play. 14,400, 7.5% top two stack, 7.8% ownership. Now, I'm not usually one to play chalk Seattle, but they've been used in a shutdown role more of late. And Minnesota's top line with Danila Yurov skating there, 2.6 expected goals against per 60. It's not really that good. That is below average defensively. Minnesota on the penalty kill, expected goals against over the last 5 weeks, basically league average. So maybe that Seattle top line can pop one here. But they've been good at 5-on-5. They have a good 5-on-5 matchup. They're all in the high teens for ice time. They're perfectly correlated on the power play. McCann has 8 shots in 4 games since coming back. At 14,400, I think they're playable here. I would rather play them than Los Angeles here tonight. That's saying something. Not that I'm super high on the Seattle Kraken, but not too keen on the Kings either. So Seattle 1, I think, is firmly in play. It's the depth lines that they had changed around a bit, assuming that the second line is still with Stevenson and Marchment. I honestly didn't realize this, that Mason Marchment has 2 goals this year, and that is after scoring 1 goal in the first game of the season. Mason Marchment has 33 shots in his last 23 games. It's under 1.5 shots per game, and he has 1 goal in that span. Is he due? or is the fact that that line is at 2.1 expected goals, 3.5 expected goals against, and is just getting hemmed in their zone? Who can say? So I'm out on them. The third line for Seattle, not really generating a whole lot. If you look at Shane Wright's third lines, haven't really done a whole lot. So for me, it's Seattle win or bust if you're playing the Kraken here tonight. If you want to do a couple depth guys because you need the fillers and whatever, but honestly, we went over the Calgary Coleman line. We went over the depth, the Buffalo third line that I think is in play, the Seattle third line. Like, there are cheap lines you can go to. I don't think you have to go to the Seattle Kraken here. So for me, it's top line or bust from Seattle. The more interesting thing is what to do on the Minnesota side here, because it is, expected to be Urhoff on the top line, and then Boldy, Eriksson, Ek, Johansson on the second line. Boldy, Eriksson, Ek, Johansson projected for way more ownership than that top line. 14.3% for Boldy, for the Boldy line, about half that for the Kaprizov line. In a sense, I get it. One, that Minnesota top line, 3.1 expected goals. Urhoff hasn't really done a whole lot so far this year. But I think that Minnesota's second line is probably going to be in a pretty good 5-on-5 matchup because, they probably are going to see a fair bit of the Chandler Stevenson line. But what I will say is that Beniers, McCann, Eberle line so far this season, 60 shot attempts, 3.3 expected goals against per 60. Those are awful defensive numbers. Like, those are basically like Chandler Stevenson defensive numbers, like, quite literally. I think it's a pretty good matchup for the Minnesota top line, and they're coming in at half the ownership, or projected anyways, at half the ownership of the Boldy line. Matt Zuccarello has 10 points in his last 10 games. Kirill Kaprizov is skating 23 minutes a night. The power play hasn't been very good, but if there's ever a get right spot for a power play, my God, is it the Seattle Kraken? Seattle at 4-on-5 this year is giving up over 14 goals per 60 minutes. The next closest team is at 11.2, and no other team is worse than 10. Like, there is a bigger gap between the Kraken in last and the Blue Jackets in third last than there is between the Blue Jackets, who are 30th, and the Blackhawks, who are 5th. That is how bad the Seattle penalty kill has been this year. Obviously, you get Kaprizov and Zuccarello on the top power play unit. If you want to take off Urhoff, make it an expensive stack, put Eriksson Ek in, I think that's fine, because Minnesota is drawing power plays, 3.1 opportunities per game over the last 5 weeks. It's the 9th highest rate in the league. Seattle's been taking some penalties. They typically haven't over the last couple of years. They have this year, and then over the last 5 weeks, basically average, a bit worse than average by times shorthanded per game. So even though the Minnesota power play hasn't really been great since that first 10 days of the season or whatever it was, this is about as good of a power play opportunity as you're going to get. So for me, considering it's a great 5-on-5 matchup, considering they're coming in at half the ownership, it's Minnesota 1. If you want to take off Urhoff and put in Eriksson Ek, it's expensive. But again, we've gone over a bunch of lines that I think are firmly in play as super cheap fillers here tonight. So Minnesota 1. You want to play Minnesota 2, go ahead and fill your boots, but it's a Minnesota 1 game for me. So for me, it's both top lines in this matchup. Is Eriksson Ek due? I'd like to think so. Certainly my best ball teams would appreciate it. He's not a guy that's really shot for a high percentage ever. The bubble season, he shot 16%, but he's been under 12% every season since, averaging 10.6%. So he should be a lot better than he is now, but, there's a reason why this guy, despite, heavy shot volume and high ice time and lots of power play time and all that, has never scored more than 30 goals and has only hit 30 goals once. He should be better than he is, but better mean like 3 or 4 more goals, not necessarily like 7 or 8 more goals than he already has. All right, let's get to our last game here. Oh boy. We have the Detroit Red Wings, a 3.3 total. They're going into Vancouver. Vancouver has a 3.1 total.
Doesn't look like Elias Pettersson is going to be back for Vancouver. Yikes. I guess by default, that means top line David Kampf, which is certainly interesting. They did use him in a shutdown role in the game. It was on Saturday that Pettersson missed. They used him in a shutdown role. If you look at that Kampf line, 63 shot attempts, 2.6 expected goals against per 60. Not good defensive numbers. I think that's probably to be expected for a David Kampf top line in a shutdown role. I mentioned that because they're going to be going up against Detroit 1. The Detroit top line over the last 10 games, 66 shot attempts, 2.7 expected goals per 60. Not great, but good enough. Finney skating around 17 minutes a game. Larkin and Raymond skating around 20 minutes a game. Last 10 games for Finney, he's over 2 shots per game. So this isn't some third wheel that's not doing anything. He's actually getting some points. He has 6 points in that span. It's a great 5-on-5 matchup for them. It's a great power play matchup for them. Excuse me. Seattle does, we mentioned the Seattle penalty kills. Seattle does have a very bad penalty kill. The Canucks are giving up the 4th most goals against per 60 on the season this year. Excuse me. They've been absolutely brutal on the penalty kill. Over the last 5 weeks, tied for the 2nd most power play goals against per game with Anaheim. Only Seattle is worse. We know how good the Detroit top power play unit is. Detroit is also drawing power play opportunities, 3.3 per game over the last 5 weeks. It's the 7th highest rate in the league. And Vancouver is taking penalties, unfortunately for them. 3.3 times shorthanded per game over the last 5 weeks. 5th most in the league. This is a very, very good power play matchup for Detroit. It's a very, very good 5-on-5 matchup for the top line. They are drawing a fair bit of ownership, I think rightly so. 17,400, 16.8% top 2 stack, 15.5% ownership. I think they're very playable tonight. Like I said, it's a great 5-on-5 matchup. It's a great power play matchup. Thatcher Demko's not back yet. He may be back later this week, but he's not expected to start here tonight. So, obviously great goaltending matchup for the top line. So, if you want to take out Finney and put in Patrick Kane, I think that's playable. That line is 19,400, so it's under 20K, perfectly correlated on the top power play unit. I get it, leaving off DeBrincat sucks, but we've gone over a lot of cheap stacks that are playable here tonight. You can put in like the 4 power play forwards from the Red Wings and still have reasonable salary left even after you put your goalie in. Now, if you add in Moritz Seider, then things might get a little bit tougher, but you still have about 3,300 left per roster spot if you start a cheap goalie like UPL or something like that. So it is playable to go with just a full Detroit power play stack here. Again, it's a great power play matchup. It's a very good 5-on-5 matchup for the top line. So I really do like Detroit 1 here. Detroit 2 has been very productive, not generating a lot. They're approaching 50 minutes together, 50 shot attempts per 60. It's not a ton, but Patrick Kane's still shooting the puck, 27 shots in his last 10 games. It's not like going up against the Vancouver depth. Whatever it looks like is going to be a tough matchup. So if you want to dip down to Detroit 2, I think that's fine. But I would prefer probably just to make it some sort of power play stack, get all the big boys in the lineup, and be on my way. So Detroit 1 certainly, but I think Detroit power play is kind of where I'm at. On the Vancouver side, it's not like the Detroit top line is great defensively either. And while I hesitate to use David Kampf or really just kind of speak his name into existence, that Larkin, Raymond, Finney line, 2.6 expected goals against per 60 this year. The problem is they get a lot of ice time with Moritz Seider, and he's been maybe the best defensive defenseman in the NHL this season. He has really helped keep the shots down, really helped keep the goals against down. So it's kind of a tough matchup for that Vancouver line. And then after that, do you want to play a Max Sasson, Jake DeBrusk, Linus Karlsson second line? Like if you want, I don't mind some one-offs here. Kiefer Sherwood has 25 shots over his last 10 games. Now, I know he only has 1 goal in that span, but he's only 4K. He's going to have to get ice time because there's so many guys still missing from this lineup. No Pedersen, no Hedel, no Bluger, no Hoglander. That's 1/3 of their starting forwards are missing. So, if you want a one-off Sherwood, one-off Evander Kane, I think that's fine. I don't think I'm super keen on stacking anything from Vancouver here. The top line is 12K, and they're coming in nearly 2x ownership to their top 2 stack. I think that's a little bit too rich for me. Same thing with the Sasson Carlson line, over 2x ownership compared to their top 2 stack. So for me, I think it's some one-offs from the Vancouver side. Big surprise. I like the Detroit side better here. So for me, it's Detroit 1/Detroit power play, easily my favorite thing in this game. All right, those were the 5 games. I know it's a little bit quicker than we usually do. That's what happens when you have one person talking to himself. Defensemen. There are some solid defensemen at the top of the board here tonight. There are 3 defensemen over 6K. We have Quinn Hughes, we have Rasmus Dahlin, we have Moritz Seider. Quinn Hughes has the best point per dollar value. He's my favorite play on the Vancouver side. While I'm not super into stacking them, I think one-off in Quinn Hughes is perfectly fine. Vancouver still has a 3.1 total here. Seattle's only at 2.6. Utah's at 2.7. Calgary's at 3.0. It's the second highest home total on the board behind Toronto. So I certainly do not mind playing Quinn Hughes here tonight. My number 2 would be Seider, just because it is such a good power play matchup for Detroit. His fantasy point per dollar is just slightly behind Rasmus Dahlin, so I think they're basically interchangeable. But I like Seider, especially if you're playing some sort of Detroit stack. So for me, it's Hughes 1, Seider 2, Dahlin 3. In the mid-price range, Rasmus Anderson still running the power play for Calgary. Listen, like I said, I do think Buffalo's penalty kill is going to crash eventually. It's just a matter of when it happens. I think Rasmus Anderson firmly in play at 5,200, especially with the shots and blocks that you can get from him, especially against a team like Buffalo. Should mention Morgan Riley. Looks like he's back on the top power play unit for Toronto. Interesting thing about Riley, one of the reasons why we never really like using Toronto defensemen is that historically, I mean, this is going back like 3 coaches. They never let their defensemen really jump into the play. That's changed this year for Riley. His offense created off the cycle is like 50% higher than it was last year. He is jumping up a lot. So it's not just the power play time. It's the fact that he is getting himself involved in the play a lot more often. I don't mind Riley here under 5K at 4,800. Vince Dunn, always playable for me for Seattle at 4,500. If you want to go to Montour instead because of his peripherals, I think that's perfectly fine. Mackenzie Weegar for Calgary, not getting the power play time, but, you don't really stack Calgary for the power play time. Anyway, Darren Radish. Not sure if anybody noticed in the game on Saturday when is it Saturday? The days all blend together. When Tampa Bay got Victor Hedman back in the lineup, Hedman wasn't even on the power play. You had Radish on the first unit and Charles Edward Dastus on the second one. So I think Radish still very playable here. If you want to use Brock Faber because he's on the Minnesota power play and it's a great power play matchup for him, I think it's fine at 4,600. Under 4K, Philip Hronik for Vancouver, still getting good ice time. He's at 3,700. He's in play for me. Adam Larson. I feel like we missed the Adam Larson game. This is a guy who will put up some big games every once in a while just because he does block a lot of shots. And then once he adds other things to it, he can have a big night, goal and an assist in his last one. But, don't mind Larson. Under 4K here tonight against Minnesota. Matthias Samuelsson for Buffalo. Facing a Calgary team that actually fires off a reasonable amount of volume. Samuelsson firmly in play for the block bonus. Jonas Brodin for Minnesota. If you don't want to use Faber, if you want to save $1,200, I think playing him is fine. I'll mention Drew Doughty. I mean, for what it's worth, he's on the top power play unit for the Kings. It's not really worth a whole lot, but he's also only 3,400. So I'll mention Doughty, but Hronik, Larson, and Samuelsson kind of stick out to me. Looking at the cheap guys, there's some interesting options here under 3K for the Flames. Yan Kuznetsov. He's under 3K for the Flames. The Flames are in a good home matchup against Buffalo here tonight. Kuznetsov is last 5 games, 22 and a half minutes, 23, 20 and a half, almost 24, 22. He's averaging 1.8 blocks per game. Now, he only has 3 points or whatever, but again, like if you can get a block bonus just for his price, I think it's perfectly fine. He's only 2,700. So if you get a block bonus, that's fine. If you get a block bonus, a couple shots, great. If you get a block bonus and assist, man, you're rolling. So I really do like Kuznetsov under 3K. JJ Mosier for Tampa Bay, 2,700. Not really doing a whole lot, but gets good ice time in a really good matchup. Troy Stecher for Toronto. Toronto's not typically a team that I go to for my defensemen just because they don't get involved so that much, but he's looked good for them since he's joined them, and he's at 22 and a half minutes per game over his last 5 games. 22 and a half minutes a game for a home team with a 3.2 total shooting against Jonas Johansson. There are worse ways to spend $2,500 on DK, and I'll mention Charles Edward Dastus again. He's min price on DK. So there are some min price defensemen here, Stecher and Dastus, that you can use. Kuznetsov, 2,700. Lots of cheap defensemen if you need them. Looking at the goalies, I'd rather not, but we kind of have to. It is a DFS show. Philip Gustafsson leading the way. Point projection, 12.45 for 8,100. But he's second in point per dollar to Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. Going into Calgary at 7,200. Again, the Flames typically put up good shot volume, typically don't score a lot, though. Just for example, the Calgary Flames over their last 15 games, 6th in the league in shots per minute, 31st in the league in goals per minute. So, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, listen, I get it. We don't like relying on Sabres goalies. The Sabres have been horrific on the road this season, but at 7,200, if you need a cheap goalie, I think he's perfectly fine here. But Philip Gustafsson and Dustin Wolf would be the 8K plus goalies that I like here tonight. UPL, again, for the cheap guy, if you want to play him. I did have a little interest in Joey Decord if he was going to start, but he's not starting. So I'll say Darcy Kemper instead. Now, Kemper, I'm assuming Kemper starts. Kemper hasn't started more than 4 games in a row all season. Tonight would be his 4th in a row in this little stretch. But Los Angeles's next 2 games are against Seattle and Calgary. So I think Forsberg probably gets their next game, and then Kemper goes tonight. Kemper doesn't have a good projection, but listen, the Kings, in line. I think they're in line to win that game. Utah's look kind of shaky. They don't have Logan Cooley, so I think Kemper for cheap is fine. But for me, the 3 goalies that I'm really looking to here tonight are Gustafsson, UPL, and Dustin Wolf. All right, that'll do it. Those are all 5 games. Those are the goalies. Those are the defensemen. Prospect says play the 6,500 goalie and take the 0. Honestly, it's not a terrible idea. I mean, it's not a good idea. Like, don't do that. But I certainly get where he's coming from. Brandon asked thoughts on Turatu. Yeah, playable. All the cheap guys from Vancouver are playable. It's not a bad matchup. I just don't think that I'm stacking anything. Thanks again for tuning in. Certainly going to be back tomorrow for it is a Tuesday slate. May be doing solo again. Not too sure. We'll see how that goes. But just want to thank everybody for hanging out. Want to say good luck tonight. And before I go, my hat trick pick for tonight, Nazem Kadri. Go get him, Naz. Good luck tonight, everyone.